Hello, I'm Justin, and I'm a black college student currently majoring in art and creative media. Being a black person who draws a lot of black characters and loves seeing black art, I wanted to dive a little into the history of black liberation art after learning about it through my art history class. Since this is a very broad topic, I'm not going to go too in-depth, but I wanted to discuss how black people have been depicted in art, as well as how black artists have been used in art throughout history. And since the topic is about black people and art, I, a black person, will be drawing some art in the background while discussing this topic. Through my findings, I've concluded that art has been used against black people to target, silence, and devalue them, which is why it's vital to uplift black artists and honor black liberation art. Black art has also been used to retaliate against racism and depict our history, struggles, pain, and successes when others refuse to acknowledge it. Reparations are due, and black art depicting black history and culture needs to be praised and shown to the public more instead of being criticized or seen as controversial. So let's dive a little into the history of black art as well as black liberation art. Due to the prevalent racism and bigotry of the past, a lot of depictions of black people in old art tend to be racist caricatures, blackface, or have very harmful connotations to them. The article, The Reception of African Art, by Dr. Perry Clem, mentions in the first paragraph that if you were of African descent, you were seen as less civilized and the art you made could not be considered such. The article, African American Art and Social Justice, by Dr. Elizabeth C. Hamilton, furthers this statement by stating that after slavery ended, the United States still refused to accept black people's freedom. As a result, things like blackface ministry and racist branding images were popular. Aunt Jemima is a prime example of racist branding art containing black people. When you hear this name, you may think of the American breakfast brand for pancakes and cereal, but this name and character actually have harmful origins. As the article Betty Saar, Liberation of Aunt Jemima by Sunata K. Sanal states, Aunt Jemima was a mammy character meant to recall the quote-unquote good old days of slavery. She's depicted as an overweight woman who was compliant with the racial hierarchy of the Jim Crow era, and her purpose was to serve her plantation owner with a southern hospitality smile. Later, the Pearl Milling Company created an Aunt Jemima logo, which normalized the character. Her depictions in art could range from having a somewhat normal appearance despite the racist connotations, to full-on discrimination with big red lips and black skin. These kinds of racist stock characters were used to depict blackness as ugly, stupid, and disposable unless they were serving their slave owners, and these racist stock images would also be used in advertisements, music, magazines, and even made into things like furniture, notebooks, and ashtrays. Examples of this are the Aunt Jemima notebook holder and the salt shakers depicted. Racism didn't stop at advertising and objects, though. Blackface was a very popular form of theatrical art where non-black people would put on black makeup on their faces to portray a racist caricature for shows. Even cartoons were plagued by this bigotry, with many examples and harmful caricatures in both animation and 2D comics and cartoons, like in newspapers. There are so many examples of this in history that Ferris EDU has a collection webpage of racist cartoons, showing 56 pictures and linking 6 video examples for the Jim Crow Museum. And as a black person, I've realized how uncomfortable it makes me to look at these images. It makes me remember the dark history, but also the danger, as these racist depictions not only put black people in a lesser light, but had the potential to get them killed since the bigotry contributed only to more hatred and violence. To see these images is hurtful and unsettling, because I would never want to be viewed like this, and the thought of someone shamelessly seeing my race in such an awful way is honestly disgusting. It's also made me hyper-vigilant when it comes to spotting racist examples or racist art traits in art and media now. Certain way lips are drawn or colored can instantly bring me back to those racist caricatures, and when it comes to anime, I see way too many poor examples of black people drawn that have these racist traits. Even now, it still seems prevalent where you often get no black characters at all, characters succumbing to colorism or being a minor character in the plot, or they exhibit racist qualities and stereotypes. I'm glad people are starting to recognize the harmfulness of this now and depict more accurate and positive examples of black representation in art, but we still have a while to go, and it's important this part of history is acknowledged so that we can avoid these atrocities in the future. Yes, these are awful to see, but it's also important to know these exist and be able to spot them so it isn't swept under the rug later like a lot of black issues are. When it came to fighting racism in the Jim Crow era, black people used black liberation and social realism art to combat the prejudice they were facing, but also to depict their struggles, history, and their fears. In the article African American Art and Social Justice by Dr. Elizabeth C. Hamilton, she states, for many citizens, primarily who are white, of the United States, the flag is a potent symbol of liberty and freedom. However, for African Americans, that same symbol is loaded with conflict and an unsettled relationship to citizenship with the United States. African American artists have used the flag not as a symbol of liberty and freedom, but as a symbol of cruel despot. Images like America the Beautiful by David Hammons and The Flag is Bleeding by Faith Ringgold depict this. Ringgold's piece dresses the bloody cruelness and racism of the US that seemed to be able to put a man on the moon, but were too uncaring to care for its black citizens. Hammons' art shows a black man being surrounded by a flag, which is supposed to act as a visual and ethical constraint. Hammons also is the one who created the African American flag, which replaced the colors of the US flag with the Pan-African one. As a black queer person, I relate hard when it comes to this, as I also have a difficult relationship with the flag. It's gotten progressively difficult for me to feel connected to my country when every day I see more and more examples of hatred and that people still don't want me to exist. And I imagine a lot of other black people still feel this way as well. Black liberation art didn't stop at the flag, however, but was also used to discuss slavery and emancipation. Hamilton states that when slaves were freed, that subverting these harmful images of black people was the goal of black creators during this period. They wanted to produce images that showed their dignity and commemoration for black people, and demolish the white gaze they often faced. Edmonia Lewis's Forever Free sculpture depicts a kneeling woman and a man with shackles on his wrist. Both of them look up with their hands toward the sky as they thank God for their freedom. Photography was also used for this reason, as Thomas E. Askew's 4 African American women seated on the steps of a building at Atlanta University, Georgia, shows 4 black women sitting on the steps in fashionable clothing in a modest pose, denouncing the primitive stereotype that was often placed on black people. James Van Der Zee's photograph called Couple also acts similarly, as it shows a black couple in front of their car. They are both wearing fancy raccoon coats, and the image is meant to show off their wealth in a society that often deemed black people as dirty and poor. Photos, paintings, and other forms of art from black people also address the horrors, cruelty, fear, and danger they had to face for their survival. As Dr. Elizabeth C. Hamilton states, systematically dehumanizing black people led to their deaths. As such, the extrajudicial murders of black people were common in the United States South. According to How Artists Championed the Black Liberation Movement Over a Century by Miss Rosen, Gordon's Scourged Back by Matthew Brandy showed the visceral scars on an escaped slave named Gordon's back. These were caused by whips he received from his overseers, and Gordon fled from slave catchers and bloodhounds over the course of 10 days until he reached the Union camp near Baton Rouge and was granted his freedom. Rosen also states that from 1920 to 1938, a massive black flag stating, "A man was lynched by police yesterday," was made in 1916 by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, after Jesse Washington was chained by his neck, dragged, stabbed, beaten, castrated, strung from a tree, and raised upon open flames over a period of 2 hours while 10,000 people watched. In 1938, they were forced to take it down, but in 2015, Dred Scott remade the flag after a police officer named Michael Slager shot Walter Scott in the back after a daytime traffic stop, bringing back the previous flag as a statement of repeating history. Jacob Lawrence created a painting series called the Migration Series, and panel 15 called There Were Lynchings shows a figure sitting on a rock looking grief-stricken as a noose hangs from a tree branch. Analyzing the grief depicted in the art suggests that the person in the photo just experienced the trauma of watching a lynching. Even in the 21st century, we are still seeing this art being made to show injustice, such as the Vanity Fair portrait cover of Breonna Taylor by Amy Sheard, and in Minneapolis, where a commemorative George Floyd mural was made by the artists Cadix Herrera, Greta McLean, and Zena Goldman a block away from where he was murdered. Racism and black terror are still real fears black people face even to this day, which is why black artists go out of their way to make this kind of art. Black liberation art is not only made to draw attention to these issues, but it also acts as a way to cope with and record history. I hope that this art will be remembered and remind black children of the dangers they may face in their history. I hope that retaliation through art will help fix the problems that many black people still go through to this day. While learning about the damage and bigotry racist art caused is a heavy topic on its own, I think it's also important to acknowledge that despite this hatred and backlash, black artists have found ways to fight against this oppression and pain through art, and as a result have created some truly powerful pieces. Black people already have to deal with the intolerance of society, and when it comes to black art, there still seems to be a lot of stigma surrounding black art that makes people want to criticize it for its discussions of race and color controversial. At the end of the day, though, I think it's important to, instead of criticizing art for touching on topics like slavery, racism, and black history, to instead praise those artists for their work and focus on providing social reparations instead of trying to silence them. More black artists need to be seen and have their work commemorated rather than criticized, and as a black person, I know that seeing this art makes me feel empowered and proud to be black. I'm finding, especially now online, that people are quick to address anything as woke and bash it when it addresses black issues in general or when it even just depicts black people, and I'm really hoping that we'll eventually be able to leave that mindset, as it's becoming more prevalent and it seems that anything containing black people now is immediately something that needs to be dissected and seen as controversial, when in reality we're just openly expressing that racism isn't okay and we want to be treated like human beings. It's also especially becoming more prevalent that whenever black art is made addressing these issues, that people want to claim that we shouldn't be bringing race into everything, when in reality, if you are a black person, you are black before anything else, and that is something that every black child is taught from a very early age. I can't get rid of my blackness, and I don't want to because it's something that I'm proud of. And I shouldn't have to avoid talking about race just to fit some white gaze or white mindset when I am allowed to exist and I should be free to address when I am being hate crimed. If people just took a moment to appreciate black art for what it is and not see it as lesser than or barbaric or fill it with their racist beliefs, they would be able to appreciate how talented a lot of black artists are and how much skill and dedication and work goes into these pieces. Researching this, I had to limit the amount of information I wanted to talk about to fit within the time constraints, and the fact that I want to turn this into a bigger, more extensive project in the future just proves to me more that this is a topic with a rich history that needs to be discussed further. To wrap things up, black art not only moves me, but reminds me of my history and my ancestors' history. But more importantly, it also inspires me to make black art and create beautiful, powerful pieces of artwork. Artwork just like the finished piece that you are seeing right now.